Why live like a slave to sin when you have been adopted as a child of God? Welcome to day 5 of Persecutor to Preacher, where we are studying the book of Galatians. At the beginning of chapter 4, Paul compares believers to heirs who once lived under guardians while they were a child. Before Christ, we were enslaved by the law. But Galatians chapter 4, verses 4 through 5 says, "When the time came to completion, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons." At just the right time, God sent his son to redeem and to adopt us. Galatians chapter 4, verses 6 through 7 say, "And because you are sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, 'Abba, Father.' So you are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, then God has made you an heir." God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying out for our Father. This means our relationship with God is not based on fear or earning his approval, simply based on adoption. We don't obey to become God's children. We obey because we already are God's children. Galatians chapter 4, verses 8 through 21 shows Paul's deep concern for the church because they turned away from the gospel so quickly. As a matter of fact, my Bible titles this section as Paul's concern for the Galatians. In Galatians chapter 4, verses 8 through 9, it says, "But in the past, since you didn't know God, you were enslaved to things that by nature are not God's. But now, since you know God, or rather have become known by God, how can you turn back again to the weak and worthless elements? Do you want to be enslaved to them all over again?" Paul warns them to not return to legalism, because trying to earn God's favor through rules is spiritual slavery. I do want to be clear here, Paul is not saying that obedience is bad. He's saying that trying to earn God's favor through the law puts us back into slavery as opposed to freedom. Freedom in Christ means that we obey from love and not fear. At the end of Galatians chapter 4, Paul uses the illustration of Sarah and Hagar to explain this a little bit clearer. One represents bondage through human effort, and the other represents freedom through God's promise. We'll do a deeper dive into that story a different day. The big takeaway from this chapter is that freedom and slavery cannot coexist. Christ is calling us to live as sons and daughters, and that is why we obey.